I challenge you to a duel.
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Movie Duel podcast. My name is Peter and I'm your host. On each episode of the Movie Duel podcast, we select a subject based around movies and then two people pick a film that they think best fits that subject. The only rule being that you can't pick a film that has already been discussed on the podcast. And you're joining us at the start, really, of a very special run of episodes. So we're doing a run of 4 episodes in which my movie duelists, so Vanessa, Jamie, Tarquin and Nicole, are going to go up against some special guests in some of our duel episodes. We're starting this week with quite a big one. Jamie will be joined by his daughter, Erin, to go head-to-head for their choices of the best time travel movie. And just very quickly before we get into that, just a reminder that you can contact us various different ways. If you check out the links in the show notes for this episode, you'll be able to see all the links to our social medias. You can message us on there, and the link to the email, and also to our Patreon site as well, in which you can get some extra bonus content featuring myself and the rest of the movie duelists, including our monthly roundtable for just $1 a month. And if you become a super supporter for $4 a month, you get access to early release quick draw episodes and our monthly recommends episodes, in which we pick a film that we've seen quite recently and recommend it to our patrons. Also, we've got some extra bonus content coming to the super supporter tier as well in the very near future, so keep an eye out for that. And then finally, just a word of warning, there will be spoilers for both films discussed on this episode, as well as a little bit of strong language. Although I did know that Mrs. Russell would probably be listening to this episode, so I did manage to not drop a C-bomb in this episode. Anyway, without further ado, let's head on over to episode 41 of the Movie Duel podcast.
Time doesn't work that way. Changing the past doesn't change the future.
Look, we go back, we get the stones before Thanos gets them. Thanos doesn't have the stones. Problem solved.
Bingo.
That's not how it works.
Oh, that's what I heard.
Wait, but who? Who told you that?
Star Trek, Terminator, Time Cop, Time After Time.
Quantum Leap.
Wrinkle in Time, Somewhere in Time.
Hot Tub Time Machine.
Hot Tub Time Machine. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Basically any movie that deals with time travel.
Die Hard? No, that's not one.
This is known.
I don't know why everyone believes that, but that isn't true. Think about it. If you travel to the past, that past becomes your future. And your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
Exactly.
So Back to the Future's a bunch of bullshit?
Right, so welcome back to Jamie. Jamie, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I mean, when were you here last? Now it's back with what was it?
That was Nicole with the Marvel.
Oh, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
God, that feels
Yeah.
like forever ago. And I know that episode's
Yeah.
only just sort of gone out recently, but it just feels like forever at the moment.
Yeah,
But yes, how have you been? Did you have a good Christmas and New Year and everything?
yeah, excellent Christmas. We were just all remarking on it as a family that it was one of our best Christmases that we could in recent memory. With Freya, who, as you know, has autism. She was superb. So
Fantastic.
so interested, and she didn't have any of her occasional sort of meltdowns. So yeah.
Well, did you get spoiled? Plenty of socks, aftershave.
You know what? This is the one year where I didn't get socks or boxer shorts.
Is that because you were holding out for them as well? It's not. I
Well,
normally
you know,
find that.
And to be honest, I really actually do need them because my socks just are over period of year just seemed to disappear, and I just have all these odd socks.
It's always the way.
Yeah.
It's always the way. When you need them, you don't get them.
Unfortunately, I didn't get them. Yeah. Gran did not give me them.
Fantastic. Well, so you were the first sort of guinea pig for our very sort of special guest coming on a dual episode a few months back with Ben for the big surprise when he popped up for our best anti-hero episode. Yeah. So we thought we'd come to you for our very first or very next special guest episode, and
not as much of a surprise this time round.
No, that's true. Well, it's a surprise in the fact that it's an actual genuine member of your family that we're talking about, and not one that you've made up.
I don't know if you know, I claim that Kurt Russell was my uncle.
Oh, you know what? I think I've actually told someone at school that he's an uncle or a cousin of some sort.
Really?
Anyone?
This line runs in the family.
It's rubbed off.
Equalness runs in the world. Yeah.
Well, so the voice that you can hear there, that is our special guest for this episode, who's going to be dueling against Jamie, and that is his daughter, Erin. So welcome to the Movie Duel podcast, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a genuine pleasure. Genuine pleasure. Obviously, we've heard a lot about you from your dad talking about your viewing habits on the podcast, and we're very excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I've heard lots about podcasting from my dad. I've had a go at it before, but that was quite a while ago, so I'm happy to have a fresh crack at it. And hopefully I'll have some good inputs of this particular movie.
Oh, I'm sure you will. You've obviously you learnt from the best, obviously. So
obviously.
Yeah. So it's going to be Erin versus Jamie on this episode. So I gave the guys a subject of best time travel movie. So before we get into your selection, guys, Jamie, are you generally a fan of time travel?
A big fan. Yeah, I'm a science fiction fan. Time travel films has always fascinated me. It wasn't an easy choice. There's quite a few ones that I thought, well, that'd be interesting. I thought about Avengers Endgame as an obvious one. Looper, a film that not Ryan Johnson's film that not that many people know, but I think that's a really good one as well. So yeah.
I remember just being entirely distracted through the entirety of Looper by Joseph Gordon-Levitt's chin and nose, because they try to make him look like Bruce Willis.
Of course they do, that's right.
And I just couldn't take my eyes off it the whole film, and it just bothered me all the way. But it was a decent film, it was a good film. No, what about you, Erin? Are you generally a fan of time travel films?
Yeah, definitely. I think time travel in general is such like an interesting subject, and it always makes you wonder, like, God, what would you do if you could travel back in time, especially as like a young person, as I think me and my dad are currently young people. So
thank you, darling.
So we like to think about what we would do as young people and going back in time. But yeah, I think it's really cool. And I love the specific film that I'm going to be talking about. It's definitely got a very big place in my heart.
It's your number one film, isn't it?
It is my number one film of all time.
Well, we'll put that on the back burner for now, because we're going to go to Jamie first. So, Jamie, would you please like to reveal your choice for the best time travel movie? So, eventually, I ended up choosing The Terminator from 1984.
In the 21st century, a weapon will be invented like no other. This weapon will be powerful, versatile, and indestructible. It can't be reasoned with. It can't be bargained with. It will feel no pity, no remorse, no pain, no fear. It will have only one purpose: to return to the present and prevent the future. This weapon will be called the Terminator.
You're dead, honey.
What day is it? The date!
12th May, Thursday.
What year?
I'm here to help you. I'm Reese.
DN 38416, assigned to protect you. You've been targeted for termination.
Why does it want me? Why me?
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator. Your future is in its hands.
Disguised as a human, a cyborg assassin known as the Terminator travels from 2029 to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor. Sent to protect Sarah is Kyle Reese, who divulges the coming of Skynet, an artificial intelligence system that will spark a nuclear holocaust. Sarah is targeted because Skynet know that her unborn son will lead the fight against them. With a virtually unstoppable Terminator in hot pursuit, she and Kyle fight for their immediate survival and the future survival of the entire human race. So, directed by Iron Jim Cameron, written by James Cameron, Gail Ann Hurd and William Wisher, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, Michael Biehn as Kyle Reese, Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, Paul Winfield as Traxler, Lance Henriksen as Vukovic, Rick, don't make me mess you up, man, Rosovich as Matt, Dick Miller, of course,
Dick Miller
as the gunshot man, and the wonderful Bill Paxton. We regularly speak on the podcast how much we miss dear Bill as punk leader.
Punk leader. Wow.
That's why that's what he's down as.
Okay, so I mean, well, what's your history with the Terminator then, Jamie? When did you first see this film?
I distinctly recall actually getting a VHS copy in secondary school of the Terminator, and that iconic front, cover of it, and I was just completely sort of transfixed by this. This just looks absolutely amazing. Around the time when we didn't really have trailers in the same way then, so I don't recall watching necessarily a trailer of it. I just looked at this and thought, oh, that just looks amazing. I have to watch this.
Yeah.
I just remember just being absolutely sort of transfixed, just blown away by this film. And then I do remember as well, it's premiered on BBC Two on a series of Movie Drone. It's do you remember Movie Drone?
No, it rings a bell. It
was Alex Cox, who's a British filmmaker. He presented it, and it tended to be more sort of like cult films. The first film shown was actually a previously unreleased version of The Wicker Man.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so Terminator, I suppose would be sort of technically considered a bit of a cult film because it's it is very sort of low budget, and it premiered, I think, must have been sort of early 90s, and I remember recording it and being really disappointed because it was cut. And I got around about the time when I was a young teenager, and I was really sort of, I was really affronted by any examples of censorship. So I was really annoyed by this, and I ended up, I remember a few years later, buying the VHS myself, and it had a sticker on it saying "uncut version." It was clearly that quite quite a lot of people perhaps complaining about the censored BBC version. This is the uncut version. I wasn't really sure. I thought that might even be uncut from the one I'd originally seen.
Yeah.
So, but no, it was just that version. And since then I've bought it on every other. I've had it on DVD. I've had it on Blu-ray. I've just recently got it on 4K as well. So it's a special film. It's one that well, I didn't get my daughter to watch it first. So a lot of people watched the second one first.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say my experience with the Terminator franchise is I watched I remember my brother, I think it was my brother, when he was babysitting me when I'd have been what was 91, wasn't it? Terminator 2. So
yeah,
it'd have been probably 92 when it came out on sort of rental. So I would have been 9, I think, and I sort of got glimpses of that film, and it scared the bejesus out of me, that film. But I remember being fascinated by it, and it was a long time before I got to the original. And yeah, it's quite a different film, really.
it is. It is completely different.
It's very much Alien and Aliens, isn't it? It's that sort of. It's a sequel that is is very different. Is very different to the original. So
yeah,
and maybe that's a Cameron thing. I guess I don't know. I've not seen Avatar 2, so I couldn't really. But that looks more of the same.
Yes, well, we might just briefly touch on Avatar and things if we absolutely have to. But one of the things that really draws me back to rewatching Terminator is that maybe it's because it was early in Cameron's career. This was his first sort of. Technically, he directed a film prior to this, but he sort of disowned that.
Mm-hmm.
This was his first, feature film, and so he was really sort of, keen, and he wanted to sort of prove himself. And this is lean and mean. This is 100 minutes or so. It's every film after this, I think James they're bloated. There's at least half an hour that you could have taken out of it.
Yeah. I mean, how would you sort of categorize this film? Because I think it is.
Good question.
It's one of those films that could come under any number of different subgenres.
Yeah.
What would you say it is?
Well, when I first watched it, I wasn't really aware. I don't think I was fully aware of the horror elements of it. I picked up much more on the action because that's what I was particularly interested in at the time. But looking at it now, it's definitely horror adjacent at the very least. It has this sort of stalker feel to it, where the T-800 is this relentless killing machine, and just the way that it's the machine, the cyborg, doesn't know exactly what Sarah Connor looks like. All it knows is
Sarah Connor.
Her name is Sarah Connor, and where she lives. I presume that's all he knows. He goes to the phone box, phone book, and just goes to the very top of the Sarah Connors and just goes through one by one because he's not sure which one it is initially. And just the concept of that is pretty terrifying. And it is very intense, quite horrific in places. The first few kills, he just walks up to the door, bursts it open. Sarah Connor.
Sarah Connor.
Yeah, Sarah Connor. Boom, and it's bang, 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 bang. Just just a thoroughly.
Well, that's it. It shows the Terminator's relentlessness very early on at that point, doesn't it? He's not just he's very clearly just shot this poor woman in the face, but he's not going to stop there. He's using a laser-sighted handgun, hand cannon near enough to just make sure that he's done the job, and that just shows his relentlessness from the start.
So it is clearly quite a terrifying experience. They say that Sarah Connor essentially becomes the final girl.
Mm.
Which is often sort of referenced in slasher films. So it does have that slasher feel to it.
But then I think because it has that world building and it has the Kyle Reese story that sort of runs along adjacently, and the flashbacks and or flash forwards even, I suppose.
Yeah.
It adds that other layer to it, doesn't it? It's not just an unstoppable cyborg that's
absolutely. So it has a love story running through it.
Yeah, definitely.
What does he say? He says something along the lines of, "I traveled back in time to see you, to be with you." I mean,
it does come off a bit creepy sometimes when
well, I don't know. I mean,
maybe that's more modern sensibilities, I suppose.
Maybe.
It does. It's
Maybe.
what was sort of hot and romantic in the 80s now seems a bit
perhaps
a bit Craigslist killer in 2024.
Yeah. So it's an action film, it's a horror film, it's a sci-fi film. It's got a central love story. It's difficult to sort of pin down genre-wise.
Yeah.
And argue.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that's it's almost the same with the second one. I think that's got quite a lot of sort of elements to similar elements, I suppose, but just on a grander scale, maybe. But so obviously both films that we're discussing deal with time travel. And how do you think this film sort of tackles the time travel elements and stop it maybe becoming too convoluted? Because I think with any time travel film, you've got to have a certain mark, haven't you, with how far you're going to go and how are you going to get around the fact that somewhere along the line you're going to have a massive either plot hole or you're going to tangle yourself up into knots.
Yeah. Well, if you look beyond, I mean, the central concept of time travel is great. The idea that one Terminator is sent back in time to kill Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
And then a human is then sent back to protect her. Again, both of these from the future. I think that works well. It's very effective. It explains that nothing human. That once you come back, there's no way that you can go. You can't go back. So Kyle Reese, come to 1984, he knows that he's sacrificing something. There's a good chance he's not going to survive this, and he knows that there's no chance of him coming back to where he was previously. So there's a sense of sort of personal sacrifice there, but there's complications as it continues, and essentially there's a paradox, isn't there?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's there is a big, big paradox really with Reese's involvement in the conception of John Connor.
Yes, it certainly complicates things. I mean, it's not really. There's no real proper explanation of whether this is going into like a tangent universe at this point, because it's clearly suggested that he impregnates Sarah Connor, and then you have that photograph that
you make it sound so romantic, Jamie.
Well, okay, yes, well, but he does.
He does, yeah. Well, I suppose that's the assumption, isn't it? We don't know what went on between motel and road trip.
She feels her stomach at the end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So there's a clear indication that she is pregnant. So he was sent back in time by John Connor, but he then becomes another John Connor's father. I presume.
Yeah.
Is
Like,
this going
possibly,
to?
possibly.
It can't be the same John Connor. This will be a different one.
Yeah.
But you have to presume that it's still going to be a child of Sarah Connor, so he will still be brought up in the same way. But it's a different John Connor.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, do you think? Yeah, I mean, do you think that? Do you think that it's important to the story that it's that suggestion, or do you think that maybe that's just an excuse to have a sex scene in the film?
I don't. I don't think that Cameron comes across as the kind of director who would be too bothered about putting in a sex scene for no reason. Because think about all these other films. I don't recall another James Cameron sex scene.
Titanic.
Okay, fair enough. Yes,
but yeah,
one other.
other than that, he's not. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's not. He's not really.
He's not really one for just putting in it for the sake of it. So
No.
it sounds as if it was supposed. It's there for narrative reasons.
Do you think he had an idea of, obviously when we get to the sequel, and well, not necessarily the later films, but specifically the sequel and the director's cut of the sequel.
Yeah.
There's a lot more sort of reference to Kyle Reese in that
Yes.
film. Do you think he had that in mind? Do you think he had that foresight?
No chance. I mean, I don't think so, because really, this is his first film. He had no idea it was going to be successful. He perhaps hoped it would be successful, but I think particularly in the sort of mid-80s, sequels weren't really much of a thing.
No.
It's and there's such a long sort of time difference between the first and second film.
And I think this was seen as being like a B movie, wasn't it? It wasn't like it was.
Oh yeah.
It was Orion were a relatively successful studio, but not known for big epic films and blockbusters.
It's an independent film, and Schwarzenegger was an unknown at the time.
Well, let's get into Mr. Schwarzenegger, because this is, I mean, it was his breakout, really, wasn't it? This was his first proper starring role. But I think he'd filmed.
Conan the Barbarian was his first starring role a few years prior to this, and that was successful. But I think this was the one that really sort of cemented his status, his sort of iconic status. I think.
And he wasn't the original choice. Well, there was a couple, wasn't there, including somebody in this film?
Yes, Lance Henriksen, I think, was
good old Lance Henriksen.
Yeah,
and O.J. Simpson.
Oh, that's correct.
O.J. Simpson, but they didn't think he could play a cold-blooded killer. So.
Indeed, how prophetic! A film that looks into the future just managed to do it for that as well.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing if I just mention now, in case I forget about it later on, this film hasn't lost its impact, because the way that science has progressed, the way we are looking at artificial intelligence now, and how it's potentially you're looking at technology that may go beyond human control. It's becoming more of a concern, and so I think it's got contemporary relevance.
Yeah, I think it's always been that really interesting and like you say, scary element of the Terminator franchise, even in the not very good films. The concept of the AI and Skynet and all that has been a really consistent sort of strong point for all the films, and it's been very effective. But yeah, it's definitely it feels like we're getting closer to Judgment Day.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to Mr. Schwarzenegger, he was definitely. I was much more of an Arnie fan than a Sly Stallone fan.
Oh God, yeah.
Growing up, and I think that this is arguably still his best role, and it's a role that I think is underrated. because a lot of people perhaps would say, well, he has or had certainly early on as an actor, quite a sort of robotic sort of acting style. And so therefore perhaps him playing a robot was perfect casting. But he did go to quite extensive extremes to prepare himself for this role. So did you know how much firearms training he did for it?
No.
Yeah, he did extensive firearms training for the sole reason for not blinking when he fires his guns. Because and also he needed to load his guns without looking at it. So he practiced it, and so that the tech noir scene, where he sort of really fully sort of displays that, you can see it in his performance, the way he handles the gun, the way there's a look in his eyes. He just looks like a machine. It's quite a remarkable performance. He doesn't get credit for it.
No, I think like you say, he's especially when you sort of see him in interviews and things like that. He's quite a naturally charismatic person,
yes.
And he controls a room, and you can sort of see that in a lot of his other performances. So I think you're right. This is he's got to dial it back. He's got to perform. He's got to act in this. It's not just.
Yeah.
I would say some of his performances where he is being more charming and charismatic and maybe a bit more bombastic, is probably easier for him. This
definitely.
This seems a lot more. I mean, even I think he probably takes it to a bit more of an extreme in the future films. I think this is more exactly the right tone for.
I agree. Yeah.
For a Terminator.
Yes.
So what about Michael Biehn then, and Linda Hamilton?
Yes.
Where do you think they sort of rank in this?
I think Michael Biehn is an underrated actor. I think he's really got this sort of this. Well, if you look at Arnie as this sort of unstoppable, Terminator. When he first appears, he's like this Olympian god of his stature, and he's in complete control of the time travel process. And then you get poor Carl Reese, slaps down onto the cold concrete naked. He's battle scarred. You see all the scars over him, and he's a scrapper, and he's clearly someone who will do whatever he has to do and improvise in order to defend. So he's the perfect defender, and Schwarzenegger is this perfect offensive attacker, and it's the two forces coming together that is really compelling. I think Michael Biehn, he should have been a leading man. I think when you see his performances in he's in Tombstone, isn't he?
Tombstone, Johnny Ringo, yeah.
Yeah, he's in, and then obviously Aliens. He's had some good roles, but he hasn't ever really broken through.
No, I think that was like his last sort of major role. I think was Tombstone.
Yeah. And I think he's a strong actor. I think he's good in this role. He's got a lot of exposition to get through. I think he does it well. And I think Linda Hamilton, she, particularly as you see her in the sequel, even more so. But she's presented initially, I think, as quite a naive character. I think she's supposed to be 19.
Oh, is she?
I think so. I'm sure I read the screen where she's 19. So she's really sort of presented as naive, and not someone who's necessarily going to be able to, you think would be able to look after herself. But she goes on this arc.
Yeah.
And the way that she, she ultimately has to pick up Carl Reese, who's next to death, and she's get up, soldier, get on your feet, and she is the one who's at the very end, being it's a terrifying scene at the end where the endoskeleton is chasing after her, and his hands coming out and trying to grasp her, and then you have the iconic final line, and then getting squashed. I mean, it's
Terminated fucker.
Yeah, it's a really effective end, and she's shown that strength as a character, and I think it's then it's evolved even more significantly in the sequel in a way which is believable to that character.
Yeah, it's definitely a logical evolution, and I think just going back to Michael Biehn, I think just so that that you said he's given a lot of exposition, and I think just through his acting as well, obviously we get this sense of him being this. Coming from this sort of this wasteland and having to do what he can to survive, and that sort of gets, it sort of transverses across the film, and you see what he had to do in the future world kind of thing, and he's having to put that into what he's doing at the moment, laying low and adapting weapons and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's that one scene where he does fall asleep, and he remembers a particularly traumatic scene, which reveals how some of his scarring, his burn scars, are revealed in this scene, and then he wakes up from that. So he's clearly also suffering from post-traumatic stress, which is interesting. Is someone who he's dealing with this trauma, but he's so sort of committed and driven, that he essentially is willing to sacrifice his life.
He's willing to do anything, even put on a pair of soggy tramp pants for.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's just robbed. No wonder Sarah Connor wanted to jump into bed with him.
Clearly. But clearly, Arnie gets a better deal of the clothesline, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, what about the rest of the cast? I suppose everybody's sort of quite fleeting, apart from Paul Winfield and Lance Hendrickson. They get a few sort of lines.
They get a little bit, but I don't think there's any in a film that's well under 2 hours. There isn't really the opportunity for any sort of fleshing out of them, because they do, later on give a little bit more time to Kyle and Sarah and their relationship, which you needed. But it's a chase film, isn't it? Really. Yeah. So when it being so intense and there's long drawn out, action scenes, it's unrealistic to have any more character development. I don't think it needs it as well.
No, absolutely not. No, I think it's sparing, isn't it? That sort of, like I say, you get that sort of the two cops that have a bit of interaction, but that's there really to sort of move the plot along, and the fact that they know this guy is going after people called Sarah Connor, and it leads us, it all works so well within the script. And it's probably a perfect time to talk about James Cameron, because obviously this was, like you said, you mentioned, I think he'd done the Piranha 2 Spawning before this, and this was his first sort of baby. This was his, fully fledged. I'm directing this, I'm writing this, this is my film, this is my project.
Yeah.
How do you think this sort of stands as a kind of debut for his filmmaking and his style?
Well, I think it's a second best film, and I think what the first one is. Yeah. But considering the low budget restrictions, he ended up using Stan Winston for the practical special effects, and that was a massive stroke, because considering the budget, the effects are amazing.
Apart from maybe some of the stop motion towards the end, this film looks fucking incredible. It is the only thing that really dates this film is the hairstyles. like
some of the
looks amazing.
some of the music
Well, yeah,
dates definitely dates it as well. But no, I think the production design, cinematography, Brad Friedel's score, I think everything really really works well, and it is one of Cameron's definitely his better screenplays. His writing is better in this. I don't think he's necessarily a strong writer.
No, his dialogue can sometimes be
yes,
very scrappy. Yeah,
yes, but I think it's as good as it can be. I think in this.
Yeah, I think the sort of tone of the dialogue is suited to what things like this and Aliens and some of the more sciencey stuff maybe is more of his forte with his writing. I don't think he's great at being, as we talked about way back on episode 3 about Titanic. Some of unless you're of a particular mindset about romantic films and stuff, I find a lot of the dialogue in Titanic extremely cringy.
It is, yes, absolutely. He can't really write for female characters as well.
No,
which, well, as a male, I mean that.
And considering he's been married about 8 times, you think he'd have maybe he hasn't got an idea about how women talk if he's been married 8 times. I don't know.
No. But yeah, I mean, there are sort of several scenes in this film that really have sort of iconic status. The police station scene in particular that is just a centerpiece. It has Arnie's iconic line, "I'll be back," and he certainly does come back. It's a brutal scene, and just I think just so effective, and this sense of this is just a kill machine, and it is going to nothing is going to hold it back. Doesn't matter if you're so protected in a police station. It is going to turn it upside down very quickly.
Even within that sort of story, I think other directors and writers might be tempted to sort of make more of that scene in terms of maybe building the drama and building some suspense in that scene. But he really does just continue with the relentlessness of the Terminator, and it just nothing stops in that. From when he drives through the front of the police station, it doesn't stop until
absolutely. I think you can argue it's the opposite of the tech noir scene, because there's that long drawn out build up and suspense, the slow motion of and when Sarah Connor drops her bag and puts her head down and he walks past and then he turns and locks onto her, and then it's intercut with Carl Reese realizing this, because he doesn't know what the Terminator looks like. He needs to wait for the Terminator to lock onto Sarah Connor. And that's just a brilliant scene. When action explodes, you have to consider the budget restraints. This looks as good as you possibly could get on such a low budget, and it really shows that Cameron was he was bound to be a successful director from this. Give him a good budget and he will produce.
Yeah, and I mean you've also got, as you mentioned just a moment ago, the Brad Friedel score, which I mean I can't think of anything else that he's contributed to in terms of cinema that I would immediately jumps out to me.
No, he has worked with Cameron. He did True Lies.
Right, okay.
That's Brad Friedel.
But I mean, it's such an integral part of this film, and I think Cameron's certainly one of those directors that knows the importance of a good score, and this is this is one that just so blends so perfectly. I mean, you've even got sort of moments, sort of low level moments, this sort of low level thrum.
Yes.
Just when the Terminator's walking around, when he's doing his investigating, and when he's he's on the hunt kind of thing.
And the sort of the metallic.
Yeah.
Sort of, you got a and you got it's like a hitting a steel sort of whatever to give that sort of
again. It
bang.
works with that relentlessness of the rest of the film. It's a relentless score.
Yeah.
And it's an iconic one, isn't it? It's up there. It's up with the best. Immediately that you're in the Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't think there was anything else I wanted to sort of ask. Well, maybe your opinions of the sequels. We sort of touched on them a little bit there. Are you generally a fan of the franchise as a whole?
I mean, there have been some seriously bad films in the franchise. There's no doubt about that. And I have protected my daughter from the worst of these. In fact, you've only just seen 1 and 2. Is that right?
Yeah, only 1 and 2.
So no. You saw Dark. You saw the
Dark Fate.
Dark Fate.
Did I?
I'm pretty sure.
When was that? Can't have been that memorable. Gee.
Yeah, you have definitely seen that one.
All right, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I showed you that one.
I think I got 5 minutes into that. Like, no.
It's definitely above average. I'll give it another go. But I'm of the opinion, and this is a controversial opinion, I think Terminator 2 is overrated, in my opinion. It has there are lots of issues with it, and as much as the set pieces are absolutely amazing, I have lots of issues with that film. But that's perhaps for a future episode. We could do a most overrated James Cameron or something like that. But
it's a long list.
Yeah, it is. But I thought there are parts of the third one that I liked. Right, Rise of the Machines.
I didn't mind Genesis. I think it was.
Really?
I don't know why, and it does kind of baffle me, but I didn't mind that one.
Really, that's generally considered as the weakest one of them all.
No, I don't know what it was. There's just something. There's something about it. But I couldn't stick Dark Fate at all. I got 5 minutes in, and I was like, no.
Okay.
No. But I maybe need to give it another go, because I know a lot of people have sort of said it's one of the stronger ones, or some people have said that.
But I think now, I hope, I've got a feeling that that it will be revived at some point in the future. But I think because it's so synonymous with Cameron and Schwarzenegger, I really hope they just end it now.
Yeah.
I think it's
they need to. I think really. I mean, even is it Salvation with Christian Bale? I couldn't stick that. A lot of people sort of rated that, and I just thought I was quite keen to see the sort of the post sort of Judgment Day-ness of it, and I was sort of down for that. But then they threw in this thing with Sam Worthington's character, and I was just like, I can't be bothered with this. I don't really.
Well, that film was ruined as soon as the infamous Christian Bale rant put on YouTube.
That's true. But let's go to Erin here. What's your opinion of the Terminator?
You watched Terminator 2 first, didn't you?
Yeah, I watched Terminator 2 first, and it was the right decision, because I think I wouldn't have been as connected with like the overall storyline if I'd gone 1, 2, which you'd think as a franchise it would make sense to go 1, 2, but sometimes it just doesn't work that way. So overall, I think it's a really good 80s throwback film. I do like seeing the special effects, because now I grew up with more advanced like effects that aren't practical. They're more like computer generated, and I thought the practical effects in that film really impressed me, even on the low budget. And yeah, it was an interesting insight into what you watched when you were younger, and yeah, really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. So, Jamie, anything else you want to add to Terminator before we move on?
No, I think that's
You said all you can say.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've got two more things to add to this.
Oh, go on then.
And they are two X-Files connections.
Oh.
So we've got the good old faithful Lance Hendrickson, who has been an X-Files connection about 3 or 4 times so far on the history of this podcast.
Of course, he was in the Millennium crossover.
Millennium, he's Frank Black in Millennium from season 7. And then from multiple episodes, Brian Thompson, who plays one of the punks at the start.
Of course.
He was the alien bounty hunter.
That's right.
from season 2 onwards. So two very big X-Files connections there. And yeah. I can't remember if Brian Thompson's been a connection before. He might have been. I can't remember. Or we may have mentioned Brian Thompson on the so-called X-Files podcast.
Yeah, I don't think he's come up before.
No, I don't think so. But Lance Hendrickson was in. He was a Quick and the Dead. And what else was he on that we've discussed on the podcast? There is something else.
He was in what's it? The Catherine Bigelow film.
Oh God, yes, of course he was. Near Dark.
That's the one.
Got there at the end. Well, there we go. That's Jamie's choice. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Erin's choice. We'll be back in a moment. So welcome to the intermission. So this is the part of the episode in which I would ordinarily ask my co-host a random question, a question that they haven't prepared for, and get their honest first answer. However, since we have been joined by our very special guest, Erin, today she has prepared a intermission question for us, and I believe as a bit of payback for a dad, I'm going to get to answer this question first. So, Erin, your intermission question, please.
Okay, here it comes. You have the DeLorean time machine. What past film experience would you like to have? And it can be from before you were born.
Ooh. There's so much to choose from. That's
quite literally.
There's several on my mind.
That's a very difficult question, but
can we mention several, or does that have to be one?
I think you can do several.
Well, yeah, we could do several, couldn't we? So, I mean, just because it is my favourite film, Jaws, I would love to go and see that in that that sort of summer of 75 and just be involved in that whole making of a blockbuster. Really, it was the first proper summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
So that's got to be sort of right at the top of the list. But then I think, going into, I mean, certain films that have got those sort of iconic moments and iconic twists, I suppose, especially the older ones that you sort of grow up with and that are in the zeitgeist. Films like Psycho and The Wicker Man and all of those kind of films that you just take for granted that what the twist is. Planet of the Apes, even.
Yeah.
I knew the twist of Planet of the Apes before I watched that film, but can you imagine not knowing the twist of Planet of the Apes?
Yeah.
It's great. But yeah, what about you, Jamie? Would you?
Yeah, you've.
Have I just stolen all of yours?
The concept of sharing that audience response was something so sort of groundbreaking. So Psycho was what I was thinking of. Something that just completely terrified audiences. When the shower scene happened, apparently they had to to change the sound of it because there were screams going all the way through that shower attack, and even when Norman Bates is doing the clearing up, they're still screaming in the audience. So something like that would be amazing. Or The Exorcist, it would be absolutely amazing. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, again, these sort of films that would really sort of shake up an audience. I would really like to experience. But the one that I have to go for would be Star Wars, because that is the film that I watched on a tiny screen growing up, and was absolutely, completely pulled into that environment, invested. It blew me away. If I could have watched that 1977 on the big screen, and James Cameron watched it at the cinema in 1977, and he said that's a film that inspired him to become a filmmaker. He said, "This is what I want to do after watching Star Wars." So
I mean, again, going to that, not knowing a twist, Empire Strikes Back.
Yes,
imagine
another
going
one
to watch that for the first time in the cinema and just being blown away by that. Jeez, what about you, Erin? Is there any that you'd go back to experience?
Well, on the line,
if you say anything like Titanic or anything that's like not older than the 90s,
well,
you're going to make us feel incredibly old.
It is still 90s, the one that I'm going to go for. And it's pretty much tipping 2000s as well. But I would go for The Sixth Sense, 1999.
Yeah?
Because that was the first film that I saw with such a big plot twist that I was like, holy shit, this is big. Like, wow. And I don't even know how old I was when I watched it. I was pretty mature.
It was a few years ago.
Yeah, I was pretty mature because, to understand the gravity behind the whole plot twist was kind of cool. I'd love to go back to that year, watch it in the cinema, and experience all the reactions, because that would have been like, wow, that would have been a wow sweeping through the cinema sort of reaction. And also that time of the year as well, 1999, literally before the millennium. I'd love to experience that, and the atmosphere of paranoia as well.
Oh yes,
a plane's gonna fall out the sky sort of thing.
It's Y2K as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, oh god, yeah.
And the fashion as well. I dig that fashion. I would love to just go out on the street and see people wearing these like baggy jeans and really cool hairstyles. So,
getting soaked in the puddles.
Yeah, totally.
Wow. Well, I mean, I didn't do the whole baggy jean thing, unfortunately. I was a bit more conservative in my later teenage years, and I was just too clumsy to wear baggy trousers.
I'm afraid I'd say I've never been a fashion trendsetter, as you know, darling. So yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, that's a fantastic question. Thank you very much for bringing that to the table, Erin. And we'll call that the end of the intermission. Okay, so we're going into our second film. So this is Erin's choice. I mean, was this no other considerations for this topic? Was this always going to be your answer?
Absolutely. Like, it's just been the topic of time travel for me. If you just ask me anything about time travel, the first thing I think about is a flux capacitor. Like, it's just a no-brainer for me.
So would you please introduce your choice for the best time travel film?
Okay, so I picked Back to the Future, 1985.
Mom, I had a horrible nightmare. Dreamed that I went back in time.
Well, safe and sound now, back in good old 1955.
1955? Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Hey, McFly!
This is a big one, the one I've been waiting for all my life.
You're my mom. You're my mom.
Wait, what? Marty, we're sending you back to the future!
Hill Valley, California, 1985. Destined to follow in his wimpy dad's footsteps, average high school teenager Marty McFly is about to make history. And when his wacky scientist friend, Emmett Doc Brown, fashions a time machine out of a 1982 DeLorean DMC-12, Marty inadvertently jumps back 30 years, but things were very different in 1955. Like a fish out of water, Marty gives his all to keep the time/space continuum intact. However, unforeseen romantic complications stand in the way of a safe return. Now, a pressing question arises. What will it take to go back to the future? Right, directed by Robert Zemeckis, written also by Zemeckis and Bob Gale, and the score by the amazing Alan Silvestri. Yeah. Starring Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly, Christopher Lloyd as Dr. Emmett Brown, Lee Thompson as Lorraine Baines, Crispin Glover as George McFly, Tom Wilson as Biff Tannen, and Claudia Wells as Jennifer Parker.
Fantastic. Well, let's start from the top then, Erin. So what's your history with this film? When did you first see it?
Wow, that's me and this film go back quite far until must have been like 6 when I first watched it.
Wow.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
something like that around that time. But yeah, it's definitely one of the first films I remember watching.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it sits pretty high on your nostalgia list then, this one.
Yeah, it was also an early cinema experience. I watched it several times at least before that, but it was one of my first cinema experiences too with my dad, which was lovely.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's nice. So you loved it instantly then? You sort of, there was no sort of getting used to it or anything like that? Instant love for this film?
Instant love story, me and Back to the Future. It was a marriage at first sight with that film. I was really taken by it, really taken.
Fantastic. So, and you saw these? Did you see these films in order? It wasn't a two to
yeah,
one
it wasn't let's watch the second one first kind of trilogy.
Well, my experience with this film is very similar to my experience with Terminator 2. I remember seeing Terminator Back to the Future Part 2 before I saw the first one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know whether that sort of skewed anything. I don't know, but I remember I may have seen it, but my memory is more of Back to the Future Part 2. Whether that was maybe the age that I saw it, and it was a bit more impactful because of the more futuristic elements of the second one. I don't know, but I definitely saw the second one before this one, and it was a long time before I saw the third one. I don't know why that is, but yeah. So it's very similar to my experience with the Terminator films as well. So, but yeah, it's something I didn't sort of get to till a little bit later, really, the Back to the Future franchise. So I mean, well, let's start with the cast then, Erin, because I think there's some very, very memorable performances in this film. Let's start with Michael J. Fox, because obviously he's our primary sort of protagonist of this film. How do you think he performs in this?
Well, interesting that you'd say that. I think it's quite common knowledge now that Michael J. Fox was not the first pick to play Marty. It's actually Eric Stoltz. But the fact that he was chosen over Stoltz just cements his performance in history, because it would have been so much different if he hadn't been the Marty McFly. And
I think Michael J. Fox was the original choice.
Oh yeah.
But he was caught up in television
Family Ties, was it Family Ties he was on,
right,
or something?
Yeah.
And they couldn't get him out of that sort of contract, and so they went for Eric Stoltz, and they did film for a number of weeks with him.
Yeah,
and there's footage on YouTube of that. But the chemistry was just not there. It wasn't working out.
No, I think I remember reading or hearing stories that he's Eric Stoltz is quite a method actor and wanted to be called Marty and all that sort of thing. And I think the rest of the cast who were, relatively sort of fun and laid back and maybe not quite as serious as that. And I mean, do you really need to be a method actor in this kind of film? I think you do.
It needed comic timing as well, and a bit of charisma, and that's something that
Michael J. Fox brings to the table, definitely.
Yeah.
No, very memorable performance, very impactful on the younger generation. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And especially his relationship between himself and the older crazy doctor. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting contrast. A very older guy hanging out with a high school boy. You'd sort of think that's a bit creepy nowadays. I'd be definitely questioning that if my child was hanging out with a 60-year-old guy.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it works. I think a lot of other films could have made that a lot creepier, and even if the chemistry isn't right, then it is a more creepy relationship. But like you say, I think that the chemistry between Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox, and you sort of see that on. I know there's a few sort of outtakes and gag reels and stuff that sort of do the rounds on social media and stuff, and they're probably part of the DVDs and whatnot. But you can see that they're having fun, and that really comes through on the screen in this film. And I think that's probably right for the rest of the cast as well. You can see that they're getting the tone just right in their performances.
The next character I want to talk about is Biff. He is it's an interesting contrast between how the fandom loves him and how he portrays himself on screen. Yeah. It's the fact that you're not really supposed to love him. He's a bully, he's a bad guy, but it's just, he's so iconic. There's no way you can't love him. And I always end up quoting him at least a couple times a month, especially to my dad. Just throwing up the, "What are you looking at, butthead?" every just to keep him on his toes. And yeah,
what's it? Make like why don't you make like a tree and leave?
Yeah,
and leave. Yeah,
I love that one.
Which
too.
I think were ad-libbed by Tom Wilson, if I remember right. I think
it was.
Yeah. I mean, they are all. I think the Biff character, it's quintessential bully, isn't it? Again, it's just the right tone for this film. I mean, even though there is a scene of effectively sexual assault in this film, and perpetrated by Biff, it doesn't, the tone and the performance and tone of the performance is still, it still hits right in terms of what you need for the film and what you need for the story.
But it's also interesting that you mentioned the scene of sexual assault, which could be quite uncomfortable for especially the fact that younger kids would have been watching this. And it's almost like, was that necessary to just include that? Because you very much could have toned it down in the sense that it's not very PC, especially nowadays as well, to just casually throw that into a movie.
Maybe of its era.
Yeah, very of its era.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and it's slightly, with a slight adjustment, it's not quite so aggressive or anything like that. But I mean, not that it does come across wholly aggressive, but they are laid down in a car with the door shut kind of thing. So it's quite clear what he's getting up to. But it's not something that you would include in a PG film in 2024 for sure.
Going back to the quintessential bully that you were talking about, I think I found out that he related his performance to bullies at his own school, and which I thought was interesting because the fact that bullying in America back in the 80s was so different to what like kids nowadays would have gone through, and especially in this country, it was just so different. And his performance,
I mean, do you think he's a convincing bully?
I do think he's a convincing bully. It's just he's got the stature, he's got the mean expression, and just the tone of his voice as well. It's also very harsh and grating. So yeah, definitely convincing bully.
His interactions with George McFly.
Definitely his interactions with George McFly. He's a very convincing, like, wimpy nerd. George McFly. He lacks the confidence to go and ask a pretty girl out on a date, and he doesn't have the confidence to publish his comics as well. And his confidence literally getting stamped on repeatedly throughout his life, and it projects in his adulthood.
Court time.
I'm just not good with confrontations.
I mean, for me, I think that the Crispin Glover is the one performance in the film that does feel slightly off, because I think he's genuinely a bit weird in real life anyway.
Yes,
Crispin Glover, and I think that kind of comes across, or maybe it is just sort of knowing that he seems a bit. I suppose it goes with the character, because he does feel quite awkward anyway. But yeah,
it goes hand in hand. Like with that, you sort of do have to have a bit of an odd personality to be even able to pull off like an odd character. Because I feel like he found it more natural to just be himself.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, obviously the George McFly character is again, it has that. At the end of the day, we meet him and he's being a peeping Tom. He's up a tree,
He's up a tree,
looking at somebody getting undressed.
Yeah, a lot of people forget about that bit, and every time that I watch him, I'm just brought back down to earth. I'm like, what on earth are you doing? You look so ridiculous right now, and I just can't imagine someone actually doing that.
Yeah, and I mean this is the sort of genesis, isn't it? I don't know if it was Zemeckis or Gale that Gay came up with the original concept, but I believe the concept or the original idea came from wondering what it would be like to meet his father in high school, and they ended up with this, that you bump into your father and he's up a tree with his binos.
God, I really have a good image of my father right now.
Yeah, don't go back to my past.
I don't the 1990s.
No.
At the very north tip of Scotland.
No. That stays in my past.
You were never caught. Yeah, so I mean, it is. I mean, then you got Lee Thompson in there as well, who's a very I think a very sort of, I don't want to say quintessentially 80s actress, because I've used the word quintessential already, but I think she hits the right tone. I think she has to, as well as Crispin Glover and Tom Wilson, they have to portray the characters almost as their older selves and their teenage selves. So they're doing a lot of legwork within the film. But I think I would probably say that Leah Thompson pulls it off the best.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I think it's very clear that Tom Wilson's version is literally just an older version of his high school self. There's literally no there's no change whatsoever. But yeah, Leah Thompson definitely gives off a maturer performance.
Yeah, well, I think she's played quite a few sort of teen characters in the past. So Some Kind of Wonderful is a good example of that. So she's certainly quite convincing as that sort of teen character.
Don't forget Jaws 3D.
Absolutely, yes. And I have to admit, keep this quiet, darling, don't tell Mum, I had a big crush on her.
My lips are sealed.
I mean, I think that's the only sort of part of this film I think that maybe sort of suffers from the the modern sort of high definition and what's the word I'm trying to think of, the higher quality these days. That's the only part of the older sort of makeups on Leah Thompson and Crispin Glover. They do look a bit flaky, I think, with the higher definition. I don't remember them looking quite so hokey when I watched this previously.
It's true. It shows the makeup a lot more, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I think just in terms of, again, especially Leah Thompson, just the way that she holds herself in those scenes where she's playing the older version of herself, it comes across, it comes through that sort of makeup, and you don't really you still don't notice it as much because she carries herself like an older woman, I think, in those moments. So, anybody else that sort of stands out for you in the supporting cast?
Yes, definitely. The principal at the high school, the bold one, Strickland, the bold one. Yeah, he definitely strikes me as a very intimidating man, someone who just doesn't let his guard down, and he clearly gives both of the McFlys a very rough time, and it just shows the fact that he experienced the McFly Senior first, and that gave off the wrong impression, and he just treated the junior exactly the same. And
you're a slacker, McFly.
Slacker. He's very aggressive, and especially, is it Back to Future 2 where he has a gun and he points it at him? He's like,
using that,
get off my porch.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to use that word again. James Tolkien was the sort of quintessential 80s authority figure, really, wasn't he? He was in Top Gun and the absolute classic that is Masters of the Universe. He was a cop in that, and any number of things, really. That was his forte, really.
Yeah.
And again, very, very memorable. He's one of those actors that I remember from a lot of my childhood films, really. Anybody else that's sort of in there? I mean, that's probably the most.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
You've got the sort of the siblings that have sort of fleeting appearances at the start and the finish, don't you? And,
You've got
Jennifer.
Yeah, Jennifer. Yeah, she's a quintessential love interest that he tries to impress at the beginning.
Stop stealing my words.
Oh, right. You've got it stuck in my head now. And who's that older woman who's save the clock tower? She's rattling around this pot. I remember her very clearly.
Yeah.
And she just interrupts that very powerful moment of them just about to kiss. Save the clock tower. And it really pans out the whole movie, how it's all going to revolve around this clock tower that's broken, and then whoop goes back to 1955, and it's working, and that's the key thunderstorm where the whole time travel takes place.
I think it really showed, as we sort of said with the Terminator, it's that clever writing, isn't it? Everything we get in those first 10 minutes is going to be pertinent to the rest of the story. We're gonna revisit all these sort of points, whether it's the mayor or the canvassing for the mayoral elections and the clock tower and the high school and all those sort of things. They're all there in the first 10 minutes of the film. So
it's very key to setting up the storyline. I really enjoyed all the planning of how they were going to go into the future. I thought it was very well represented. It wasn't too complicated. It was quite easy for a young me, especially, to understand, and the whole model process of how they were making and planning out how they were going to get back to the future. So that was really cool.
Yeah. Well, I think it keeps it simple enough, doesn't it? Again, sort of going back to how time travel films can make things that little bit too convoluted sometimes and start tripping over itself. But it keeps it simple, and it keeps it gives us enough sort of details that we know what's going on without getting flipped upside down with the concept or anything like that. We know that he has to steer things in the right direction, and that things have to happen as they happened or as close to as they happened in the original instance. But then I suppose it also plays with the concept of if you do change things and how that affects the future when you get back to it, which doesn't always happen in these kind of films, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the most complicated Back to the Future really gets is especially in the second film when Biff gets a hold of the
Almanac.
almanac, yes, and he suddenly gets really rich and changes the whole course of the universe. And there's very clear references to Trump Tower in New York.
Yeah.
Yes, and I thought that was really cool. But I did struggle to wrap my head around the fact that he interrupted the space-time continuum and how that suddenly changed everything. But I got older, I understood more. So really, it wasn't all that difficult to understand. I was just being a bit thick, as a kid. But yeah.
Fantastic. So I mean, we've talked about a few sort of points of this film that are maybe a little bit, what's the right word? A bit dodgy, maybe. So I think there is a clear point in this film that is incredibly dodgy that I don't think would be made today. In the fact that Marty McFly's mum is essentially trying to get off with him, I suppose is the nicest way to put it. Even more romantically than Jamie put it earlier. And how do you think that sort of affects this film with more sort of modern sensibilities? Do you think it sort of takes away from it at all?
It definitely dates the movie a bit because it's definitely giving off incesty with that whole narrative of, oh, younger mum falls in love with a hot teenage son. It's just like that would just be really, really odd now. I mean, I bet it was odd even back then, but now it's odd with a capital ODD. But yeah, I don't think it really takes away from the story. I just think it adds a bit of a comical element.
Yeah, it is. They certainly try to turn it into a comic thing rather than
it's the gag,
sinister.
Isn't it? Yeah, definitely. I think they do. Again, the tone of the film, the tone of the acting. I mean, especially Michael J. Fox's performance, just his reactions. I think are really sort of help not make that too creepy. I think even when we go to things like where he first meets his dad in the diner, and just the look on his face when he realizes it's his dad is just incredible.
It's just like it's almost like shock horror as well on his face.
Yeah.
He's like, oh my god, does my dad actually do that? Like he's getting absolutely trampled on, and he's just not doing anything.
He's a bit embarrassed.
He's definitely got 17th hand embarrassment from just watching that. As I would too. I'd be like, stick up for yourself, man. Like, what the hell?
As I said, don't go into my past if you don't mind. I've admitted before I've never been in a fight before, which suggests I was able to sort of weasel my way out of circumstances, perhaps.
Well, it just proves that you're probably a more likable guy, which is nice to know.
I just used warmth and wit to get out of it most of the time.
Charmer.
I don't believe that.
Hey.
Of course I do. I jest. But yeah, I mean, we No, I've completely forgotten the point that I was going to make there. Music, yes. So obviously you mentioned at the start, Alan Silvestri is a very successful composer, especially of late. Made a bundle off Marvel, obviously. But yeah, talk to me about your opinion of the music.
Iconic is just the first word that springs to mind. It's definitely sets the like dramatic theme of the story. It just really gets you excited because it's da, da, da,
Da, da, da.
Oh, goes like we're in front of an orchestra.
Oh, brilliant. Can't
I've
get
lost
enough.
them. I've lost them, folks.
Yeah, it does. It just really gets me in the mood for a cinema experience as well. Because hearing that in the
The cinema
cinema
was amazing.
was insane. Highly recommend if you ever can catch Back to the Future at cinema for an anniversary release. Go for it. Never experienced anything like that.
I mean, no, I was tempted with original co-host Liam. They do at the local cinema in the woods, which I've posted about a few times. They do outdoor screenings in the summer, and that was on the list this year. And I wish I had gone to watch it actually.
Yeah, missed opportunity. I would feel very upset.
But yeah, I mean, he's a legend. I mean, he's maybe not held as in high regard as your Hans Zimmers and your John Williams is, but I think he's maybe a little bit underlooked. But this is, I mean, it's a cracker, isn't it? It's one of those that you instantly know within a couple of beats of the score. You know what it is, and you're probably starting to hum it.
Yeah,
like we just did.
Exactly. We fully belted that, and he doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. Of course, he's recently done Marvel, which definitely put him back on the map again. Because after Back to the Future, I can't say I've ever really seen an Alan Silvestri film. I think there's a few. Predator, yes, that's one outside.
Yeah, I mean, Forrest Gump.
Yeah, you haven't seen.
I haven't seen Forrest Gump.
Roger Rabbit.
Everyone
Polar Express
always has a go at me, but I just haven't got round to it.
I have to admit though. I have to admit though. Go and listen back to the Roger Rabbit soundtrack, and it copies a lot of Back to the Future. I have to say it does. Yeah,
I shall have to look. I mean, it's just terrible that your father hasn't shown you the 1996 classic Eraser yet either, and you would have.
He's being a slacker. That's what he's doing.
I've been a slacker, indeed.
That holds the immortal line by Arnold Schwarzenegger, where he point blank shoots a crocodile in the mouth and says, "Your luggage."
Wow.
Yes.
Goosebumps, even if I haven't even seen it. Luggage.
Your luggage. Yeah. Okay, so what about Robert Zemeckis? Because obviously, he's, I think, a perfect segue there, because Alan Silvestri has obviously worked a hell of a lot with Robert Zemeckis. And how do you sort of rate him as a director? Are you generally a fan of his? Have you seen a lot of his films?
I don't know if you've seen too many of his films, to be honest.
I've seen a few. What are some other ones I've seen?
Romance in the Stone?
You have seen that, yes.
Seen that.
So obviously Forrest Gump. What was which was the
he did the Polar
rom-com. Was that Sleepless in Seattle? Was that right? No, it's Reiner in it.
No.
Did he do one of those? I might just be making that up. Let me have a look. Castaway.
Yeah.
Castaway did all the Back to the Futures. Death Becomes Her. Contact.
Oh, she has seen Death Becomes Her.
I love that film.
Contact. Flight.
You haven't seen Contact or Flight.
Oh, he did the new Witches.
Ooh, creepy.
And Beowulf. I didn't realise he did Beowulf.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
From that selection, yes, I'm a fan of his work. He definitely has a way with seeing in. I guess this is kind of like cliche, seeing into the future with what he can like produce, and how in the time, I guess this would be sort of like a new theory and theme to be introducing into the world, time travel. Like people would be wondering about it, but no one would ever think, oh, let's make a film about it. Like it would be quite a new like concept.
Well, he's definitely a technical innovator. You look at this, like Death Becomes Her, the special effects, and he's always pushing forward, special effects. You haven't seen Forrest Gump, but there's lots of effects in that as well. I don't know if it could be argued that perhaps he's recognized more for his advances in special effects and his actual abilities as a director. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that. I mean, I think he's he's obviously clearly a very capable director, and I think he may be a bit more quickly than sort of Spielberg. I think he probably came out of doing those the special films, I suppose, of the 80s. I mean, maybe a lot of directors that got their start in the 80s sort of did that, where he's on to sort of doing more mainstream stuff, I suppose. I mean, I suppose Back to the Future is mainstream.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of, I mean, it's Spielberg produced, isn't it? Back to the Future.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And you can definitely see those fingerprints of Spielberg, I think, on this. This is very Spielberg-esque in a lot of places, I think. Maybe it's just
a lot of students, my film study students, will often mistake this as a Spielberg film.
Yeah. But then I think you could say the same for film, even Romancing the Stone, and I mean, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Death Becomes Her, Forrest Gump, even they're all. He's obviously, I think he is a student of Spielberg. I think he worked with him because didn't he write 1941 as well, Zemeckis?
Possibly, I don't know.
So he's obviously had that relationship with Spielberg at some point. But I think he is a very, very memorable director, and he probably doesn't get quite so lauded as having that Zemeckis. You don't have like you have a Spielberg film and a Scorsese film and stuff like that, but you don't necessarily have a full feel for a Zemeckis film, I suppose.
No.
Okay, so I mean, what do you think are some of the sort of key scenes of this film? Because I think you've got, within the grand scheme of especially the first two films, there's a lot that gets revisited in the second film, and they become like almost sort of parodies, but within different times of the whole McFly saga. But do you think, what do you think is the sort of key moments of this film?
So
when Doc hangs from the
we're going to that scene,
from
or
the clock arm,
the skateboarding. Menu, I hate Menu. There's so many. What would you say are some of your favorite moments in Back to the Future?
So many. Probably one of my first favorite moments would be when Marty goes back to 1955 and he crashes into this barn. And he's wearing the hazmat suit, and these two little kids are with this alien comic, and they just see him. What do they say?
Well, they think he's an alien.
They think he's an alien, but they say something as well. And then the dad comes out and he's like, "You bastard alien! God damn it!" and like starts shooting at him. That was probably one of my favorite bits. And that's the original parking lot of the film when he goes, because it was called the Twin Pine Malls. And then when he alters time, it becomes the Lone Pine Mall because he crashes into the tree and one of his trees dies, and he clearly takes that to heart, and he specifies it's the Lone Pine Tree. So I really like that bit. And also my second favorite bit when he takes the hazmat suit back on again and he's in his dad's room and he blasts
So he
Van Halen.
He has to convince George McFly that he needs to do this certain something. He said no to it before, didn't he? So.
Yes, and it was also an inspiration for his comics. I am Darth Vader from He just clashes two major sagas together and creates this whole new character, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I really like that bit as well. And so many more I could talk about, but
I mean, let's sort of dig into the sort of finale of this film, because it is a very memorable moment, and I think it's just an incredibly well paced little stunt piece, I suppose, because we do get, preceding that, I suppose, we get the sort of culmination of the George and Lorraine story, and this epic moment where he busts out Johnny Be Good to Chuck Berry on the end of a phone, and that sort of finishes that story. But he's got to get back home, and then it really ramps up. There's so much tension in that final stunt. It is just amazing. And but there's, again, classic storytelling that he's got to keep. We've got to keep the story going, and we've got exposition within that scene of what's going on and how, and it's just so expertly done. But again, still manages to build the tension within what's going on. It's not just a simple getaway and Back to the Future kind of thing. It's got moments of genuine sort of tense moments, really.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, especially when his hand starts to fade away. You see that he's struggling, and his parents are slowly they are getting together, but he has to be the key mastermind behind it. And there's just his whole fate and his siblings' fate, as we can see in the little photograph where they're all fading away, relies solely on him, which I find pretty tense if I was the one going to save my whole family, basically. And I think the process of Doc trying to fix the wires that get all tangled up high.
It's a great physical comedy performance though as well.
Yeah.
How he's able
to maneuver up there at his grand age would be very impressive for me. If I could do that at that age, I'd be quite happy with myself. But yeah, I think that definitely created tenseness in the film, because when I experienced that at the cinema, it was honestly the first time watching it again, because I know what's going to happen. I watch this several times a year, but I'm just oh my goodness, is he going to fall? Because he was just precariously hanging off a clock face. You don't do that every day, do you? So.
No, it is. It's great. It is. It's one of those magical experiences where you can live it every time. Every time that you watch it, you can feel, that same sense of tension, and still get excited or even doubt that he's going to make it. But you're just there, ready to whoop and cheer. Really, not that I whoop and cheer at home on my own.
That's a bit cheesy.
Yeah, just a bit. Okay, so I mean, was it Jamie? Let's go to you. What's your sort of overriding opinion of Back to the Future?
I adore Back to the Future. It's a film that's I was very, very keen to get Erin into. I just had this feeling that she was going to love it. It's a real sort of family film for me, because one of my earliest memories of watching it, definitely wasn't the first time. I watched it a few times, but I remember convincing my dad to watch it, and he's not a film man at all. He's never shown any real interest in watching films. But I remember I was like, "Oh, watch Back to the Future. You'll love this, Dad." And I didn't really realize that 1955 was his era,
right?
And I just thought he'd love it. And so, but he kind of enjoyed the beginning, but as soon as Marty goes back to 1955 and
I like this.
what's that song?
Oh,
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. He was just tapping his feet, and he just loved it from that point onwards. And at the end of it, oh, what a film that was, son! Oh, marvelous! Oh, we can watch that again. And he did watch it a few more times. He just loved
fantastic.
it. So yeah, it holds a very special place in my heart because it's a real sort of family experience. So with my dad, and then with Erin.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, there is. Yeah, I mean, I had not really sort of twigged with me until I watched it this time. But obviously, there's the reference to JFK as well, isn't there? And then there's the sort of like, who? And it's like, I never got that before. I don't know why. And I'd also never picked up that Lorraine's mum is the mother from Gremlins.
Yes, that's
I've
right.
never picked that up before.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. The one that gets attacked in Gremlins. Yeah.
Who is obviously
Blender.
is obviously quite clearly the quintessential 80s mum.
Must be
of cinema.
Must be. But I think just everything about this film is so cleverly crafted. It's I know that it's a screenplay that is taught at universities. Because it's just an excellent example of a 3-act screenplay. But just look at this. I often show the opening sequence to my film students because I think it's an excellent example of how to visually open your film, and to introduce characters through the costume mise en scène. So you've got the camera panning across all of Doc's inventions and his clocks.
The clocks at the beginning.
Yeah, and then you get lots of visual information, exposition about his background and about the fire. It gives you a little cheeky foreshadowing of the tower.
Yeah, it does. And the underneath with the atomic.
The plutonium. Yeah, again, it's perfect. Again, the camera pans to a TV showing reporters saying that plutonium has been stolen, and then that's when Marty opens a door. You see his focus on the skateboard. He kicks the skateboard along the floor. It knocks into the plutonium. And it's just lovely visual storytelling. You see a lot of Doc's inventions that they're working, but they're not as well.
They're like overworking in a way.
But he's just got an invention for everything. But he hasn't found the invention that's really worked for him yet.
Yeah.
But the ultimate invention is just about to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Well, I mean, we've touched on the sort of sequels a couple of times. Erin, are you a fan of the sequels in general?
I'm definitely a fan of the second one because I think that's more of an interesting subject for everyone. Is going into the future, like what will it be like? Will it be so much better or so much worse? It's kind of like a more interesting topic. I love the storyline of the second one as well.
I mean, you would have watched it quite close. Is it 2025? They go to the future?
Yeah.
So 2015, I think. 2015.
Is it 2015?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, it is. Yeah, 2015. So when you first watched it, it would have been not far from that. Whereas when I watched it, that was futuristic. That was in the future.
This was where we could be.
Yeah. So you watching it, what did you think about some of the predictions for the future?
Some of them are obviously clearly like really out of pocket. Like flying cars was the main thing people thought we were going to have, which is kind of crazy because it's totally not the case. But I thought it was so much different from what I'm used to. I was like, it sort of blew it out of proportion for me, and part of me thought, oh, that's just ridiculous. Why would we have that now? But then I also think, what would I think that we would have had at this time? It would have been exactly the same. So
some of them they definitely get wrong. A fax machine the fax machine certainly didn't have any sort of existence.
Well,
at that time.
we got video calls.
We did, yes. That we got that one right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just not on a big screen in your living room. That's
yeah.
And flee from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yes.
So, am I taking from that from what you said there? Are not a big fan of the third one?
Yeah, the third one, it definitely goes in order 1, 2, 3 with the best to worst. The third one, it sort of shifts focus away from Marty, and it's more of like Doc's story. And it's like, it's not a problem. We love Doc. He's amazing, but we don't want to always hear about his love life as like an older guy. It's not exactly what I want as a cool movie in with the fam. It's yeah.
do you have any interest in westerns? You haven't really watched any westerns, have you?
I haven't been introduced to westerns in particular.
That's probably the only one.
No, but then there was a film shown on Christmas Day, or was it New Year's Day, that we put it on silent. We weren't really watching it.
Oh, The Searchers.
The Searchers. So I thought that was clearly a western film.
I think westerns for modern audiences are most of them are troublesome in some way, aren't they? Anyway, I think just the depictions of sort of Native Americans for starters in a lot of the older classics and stuff. But I mean, a great place to start if you love a bit of cinema is Once Upon a Time in the West. That is a masterpiece. And I would thoroughly recommend that as maybe a delve into some of the older style, especially the spaghetti westerns.
I think I'm more likely to introduce her to The Quick and the Dead. I think that's the right introduction.
Yeah, possibly.
Because I think it's a bit of a blueprint of all of the sort of. It's like a highlights reel.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tombstone. You can't go wrong with Tombstone.
That's probably the two ones I would show as first for a Western novice, and then I think we'll Once Upon a Time in the West is a little bit further on. I think
take it from the film teacher, man. He knows his stuff.
He certainly does. Anyway, we're getting way off the beaten track here.
We are.
Okay, so anything else that you want to add, Erin, before we wrap this up?
Again, I just think it was the right film to just stop on with Back to the Future 3. There's not much else you can talk about because, like, what's the next period they're going to visit? The dinosaurs? Is like the Wild West is the last visitable period they can go to.
I really do hope. This is what I really hope they never remake this film.
Yeah, they've been talking about it, and even me, who didn't grow up like in that era with the film, I feel like it would be a betrayal to like my love of the film if it got remade with completely new cast. It just would not feel the same.
Yeah,
and I'd leave it on that.
Okay. Well, so now comes the part of the episode where I sort of make a decision. Who do I agree with on this one? And this is probably the most difficult that we've had on these sort of me sitting in judgment of your choices. And I really don't know. I've been pondering this for...
I mean, it's quite clear, Peter. I mean, you know...
I don't know. I mean, there's a difficulty because they are two different genres, two different sides of films, and obviously with it, the key element is the time travel, and
it's handled so much better in the Terminator, though, isn't it? But just forget about the paradox thing. I mean, you know, we can just forget about that.
There's always a paradox. There's always a paradox There's always a paradox in a time travel film, and I think the Terminator is a fantastic film. It is a 5-star film, but also Back to the Future is a 5-star film for me. And
yeah, I agree. It's better. It's just better that way. And it's a family film. It's just better all the way around.
So I've probably got to put it down to which of these films I've revisited the most. Okay.
That's fair.
So I am going to agree with Erin on this one. And it is very close. There's not a lot. I mean, I will say something. Although I think they're both 5-star films, they're not ones that I revisit a hell of a lot compared to a lot of other films, and I wouldn't put either of these in my top 10. But I do recognise that they are fantastic films, and I think they really sort of blazed a trail for their respective kind of genres, really, and the filmmakers in it to a degree as well. But I think for me, there is just that little bit of something to Back to the Future, and maybe it's the more sort of fun elements of it, and it is a great comedy. It is a great comedy, and I think there are maybe other sort of similar films. I think to disagree with you, Jamie, a little bit earlier on, I think Terminator 2 I think is on par with The Terminator. I think it does. It maybe does have problems a little bit too long, and it's Cameron getting a bit more above his station, maybe. But again, maybe that comes from me sort of seeing that one first rather than the Terminator.
I think that is possibly the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'd watched Terminator 2 first, I think I'd have more of a nostalgia for it. But yeah, the other way around it too. I would like to bring it to the pod at some point. We'll speak about Terminator 2 in more detail and explain the issues I have with it.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I grudgingly agree with your decision. Yeah. Well done.
So that's it. I agree with Erin on this one. And listen, Erin, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. And hopefully, at some point in the future, you'll come back on.
I hope so too. This was definitely a really fun experience. I loved hearing all of your analysis.
Our quintessential analysis.
Your very quintessential analysis. I'll be using that word probably a lot tomorrow, and it will really annoy the hell out of me.
That is your fault.
God damn, Peter.
Fantastic. So, Jamie, anything that you wanted to plug or promote or tell us about before we wrap this up?
You can hear me on a variety of different podcasts. My main podcast is a co-host on this, of course, Movie Duel, but I've also done podcasts for Filmbusters, Movie Drone, and my latest one, which will be coming out at the end of this month, is The Alien Effect, which you don't know about.
No, I don't.
That's coming out.
It'll be out as this episode. When this episode goes out, it'll already be out.
Could well be.
It will be. It will be.
Okay. So that's coming. I will also be recording for Filmbusters at the beginning of February.
Ooh! Does that mean I get another spoiler?
Possibly.
I told you what I was going on.
That's a no. Possibly no.
Maybe off mic.
We'll see.
Okay, so that just leaves me to say goodbye. It leaves Jamie to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And it leaves Erin to say...
Manure! I hate manure! Goodbye.